That'll do, Jets. That'll do.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you enjoy what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, the Jets just finished taking on the New Jersey Devils, and what a nice win it was. 4-0, Connor Hellebuyck shutout, his 7th of the season, which is actually now a career high, and we didn't just have that milestone. Mark Scheifele takes the lead in franchise history from Blake Wheeler, 201st career multi-point game, so that's pretty darn cool. But this just felt like a really nice team win, and we'll talk about what stood out in what was a pretty complete front-to-back performance in just a brief moment. Before we do, though, I did want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Now, like I said, the Jets just played a pretty complete game. The New Jersey Devils are definitely not where they were at the start of the season. They are missing a handful of really important players, guys like Siegenthaler, obviously Hamilton, Jack Hughes, even Luke Hughes actually got sidelined for this game. It was more precautionary, they said, but basically Sheldon Keefe was suggesting that whatever he's dealing with, whether it's an illness or an injury, would probably have been further aggravated if he tried to play. So New Jersey was really rolling around with a pretty, I don't want to say slapdash lineup, but they were really trying to pull together as much as they could in this game. And for the Jets, Winnipeg really didn't make any changes. The only notable last minute change was Rasmus Kupari, who is now day to day with some sort of injury, coming out in favor of David Gustafsson. To be honest, I actually just think Gustafsson should be in the lineup somewhere in general. I think he's really had a very good season. And, I know that there are plenty of guys who are all vying for limited ice time when it comes to the bottom six. But I think, Gus to me actually has some real interesting upside. And he's actually starting to put two and two together in a more consistent way at the NHL level. In previous years, I don't know if I really cared if he played too much. I do like him personally, and I think he's a cool prospect, but he didn't really have an impact at the NHL level that I thought was appreciable. This year, though, it's been a little bit of a different experience. And in tonight's game, the Jets, right in the first couple of minutes, got on the board 2 early goals. Alex Iafallo getting in on a crash the crease sort of rebound opportunity. David Gustafsson really kind of doing a very similar thing. This one, another crash the goal mouth and capitalize on a loose puck sort of situation. And Gus, I just feel like has shown some nice progress this year to where, personally, I just don't think he really should be benched. His forechecking ability, his creativity and skill, there's a real player there. And if the Jets ever start to give him more responsibility, I think that there's something very intriguing. Honestly, if you were to roll something like Scheifele, Lowry, and Gustafsson as your 3 centers, which I know the Jets aren't going to do because they have their sort of, I guess, game plan for how they want to approach this lineup. But I actually think that would be really intriguing. Having 2 Adam Lowry kind of ish players in your lineup is something that I think most teams would be really jealous of. We've all seen how Lowry is, and Gus has kind of some of those similar shades. I think he's a little bit better of a finisher in general. But yeah, just having him in the lineup in general, I think just leads to good things. He's kind of a beast. And it was nice to see him get back in the game and immediately have a positive impact. And he was one of those guys who, throughout the night, I thought really played quite well. In fact, generally speaking, this team just played pretty good hockey the whole way through. A couple of moments where maybe they gave up a couple of extra shots here and there, but for the most part, the Devils really didn't get a lot that was particularly dangerous. I could probably count the number of times in memory that I recall New Jersey getting really close and in Hellebuyck's face and actually creating something dangerous out of it. For the most part, it was probably more on the power play than anything. Otherwise, at even strength, this was a pretty low event game. It kind of reminded me a lot of the Caps game where the Jets didn't create loads offensively at 5v5, but what they did do was, not only keep the Devils away from Hellebuyck for the most part, but when they did create some chances, it was pretty dangerous. It was down low, and they got themselves a couple of nice, hardworking goals. One of the goals from Scheifele was actually a really nifty play. He batted down a puck from like the defensive zone, carried it through the neutral, and then with a little bit of a give and go with Kyle Connor, actually got a rebound off the backboard and just beat the defender back to it and ended up scoring his goal. Really cool, really complete effort. And I thought Scheifele in particular this night really shone. I know his line the past couple of games has come under a lot of scrutiny, but this was just a really good game from him. Iafallo also did collect another goal later in the game, this one on the power play, kind of making you feel less bad about Velarde being sidelined. Iafallo, I think, has done a pretty nice job of filling in. Yes, he's not going to have the offensive creativity and stuff that maybe a Velarde does. The stick handling and skill that Gabriel brings is just really not matched by anyone except maybe Ehlers and Scheifele on this team. But in Iafallo's case, he just plays a very straightforward game. And I think in a night like this where the Jets really controlled play and just generally got to work and played, meat and potatoes, keep it simple, don't do anything stupid, it worked pretty well. So, yeah, another nice game for the Jets. They move back into first in the league. Great feeling. With Winnipeg really needing to keep pace and get every 2 points that they can out of every game that they're playing going forward, even the easier ones, it's nice to see the Jets, get back to winning ways, kind of do what they do. And I think both of these last couple of efforts, sure, they have traded like offensive creation in some ways, but I will say that defensively, this team has really tightened up, and they're frankly just not letting their opponents get too many looks. That's the kind of stuff that I think can help you in the playoffs. And with the Jets continuing to just really add to their goal differential and be really stingy, you can't hate it. So very happy with this result. I think another impressive win for the Jets. Again, I know the Devils are kind of crappy right now and pretty beaten up, but I don't think that should necessarily take away from this accomplishment. Also of note, the Jets are the first team to 50 wins, and I believe they're, from what I saw, the first team since 2010-2011, the first Canadian team to reach 50 wins first in the league. So a really cool accomplishment for this Jets squad. 104 points, playoffs are right around the corner. Let's just hope that they can keep the pace up, especially on this upcoming very difficult road trip where they will be tested. But now, if there was ever a time for them to really take advantage, lock things down, and get that number one seed, you know what? This is a great opportunity to do it and show the league that you are serious about your contention window. The Jets, I think, have already done that throughout this year, but it doesn't hurt to add a little bit of emphasis heading into the postseason, right? Add that little bit of a feather in your cap, and things will go pretty well. But yeah, great win. Easy-ish 2 points for Hellebuyck, I would say. He didn't have to do a ton tonight. Had a couple of difficult saves, but I think his overall season performance is trending towards really one of the best that we've seen from a goalie in years. And I want to chat about him in particular because he's now actually the betting favorite from another of gambling sites that suggests he actually is now the Hart favorite. Forget the Vezina. He is earning himself a lot of MVP attention. And I want to chat about his season and really just reflect on what it has been, what has really been such a privilege to watch him become this elite and really franchise historically great goaltender for the Jets. We'll chat about that in just a brief moment, but before we go any further, did want to let you know about our friends and partners at FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. Now, for me, my interest in March Madness is unfortunately dead now. Both the Maryland men's and women's teams have lost in their opening round of the Sweet 16. It's okay. I'll just have to take it a little bit on the chin. But if you're maybe a Florida Gators fan or a Carolina Gamecocks fan in the women's side of things, maybe this is your chance to cash in big, right? Both tournament favorites, or maybe you think that somebody might finally catch their number here over the next couple of rounds. Whatever it is, though, FanDuel is the easiest way to do it. Their app is super safe, secure, and when you win, you get paid instantly. There is no waiting around. And with tournament games happening every single day, there's always something exciting to bet on. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us tonight on Locked On Jets as we are chatting a little bit about Connor Hellebuyck. I'm going to obviously sing his praises. It's, I mean, how can you not, right? Connor Hellebuyck is truly one of one in this league, and we are seeing him not only follow up really one of the greatest seasons of his career last season, but he's now following it up with one of just the best NHL goalie seasons in history, right? This guy has really become not only Winnipeg's best goalie ever and arguably their best ever player outside of like Dale. You can sort of debate that one. I'm not going to touch that. I think Chucky for me will always kind of he'll always have that. I don't think I ever want to touch the Haverchuk legacy. I think Dale should remain the number one. But in terms of like the modern Jets, right? Hellebuyck is very clearly number one. I don't know that anyone else really comes close. We can debate all sorts of skaters and players that have suited up for this franchise, and like the Jets have had a lot of really, really good ones. Scheifele, Morrissey, Connor, but Hellebuyck above them all is this team's heart and soul. And nothing that I think they really do in any season recently starts without him. He is truly the guy who has dragged them through bad seasons. He's been one of their best performers in great seasons. And this year, he's just really turned up his already ridiculous performance to another level. Right now, he leads the league in wins, goals against average, save percentage, and shutouts. Apparently, this echoes Jacques Plante and Bernie Parent as the only other guys to have done this. And we're talking like 1958, 59, and 1973, 74. This is the only time that goalies in the NHL have ever led these categories in a season, right? So the last time they did, both of those teams won the cup. Now, look, this is like we're talking 70, 80 years ago in some cases, but assuming Bernie's case is a little more recent, it's in the last 50-ish years. Okay, that might make you feel a little bit good, right? I think it really just speaks to good, how amazing Connor Hellebuyck has been, and obviously, look, the modern era is just not comparable to the way the hockey world was back then. The league's existence was a little bit different and in different forms at the time, and so again, not super comparable, but I just think that with how good Hellebuyck has been this year, if his playoff performance matches his regular season performance, then Winnipeg really has one of the clearest and most decisive advantages of any team in this playoff run. There are lots of great goalies out there, but Connor Hellebuyck is one of one. He has really risen to the top of the pile. And in a lot of ways, he's doing the Carey Price thing when Carey Price won the Hart Trophy a few years ago. Well, I say a few, it's now been a little bit longer than that. Been what, about almost 10 years now, maybe just about that. So for Hellebuyck, he is now currently the Hart favorite. And I guess you could look at some of the other guys and maybe they'll do it, with a skater again. Usually that's who the MVP is. There's of course, Draisaitl, McDavid, McKinnon. Those kinds of guys are usually the ones who get the nod. In my mind, I feel like Hellebuyck has deserved a Hart for much longer than that. Oftentimes, when you talk about Winnipeg making the playoffs, whether his save percentage is a 910 or a 940 or whatever, doesn't really matter. He is responsible for a lot of Winnipeg's playoff runs. There were years where the Jets' offense and defense were just I can't technically use colorful language on this episode, but just know it sucked. Winnipeg's back end was a mess, and despite that, Hellebuyck was still putting up like 30 to 35 goals saved above expectation seasons, which puts him in the Vezina conversation. And, even in years where his save percentage maybe took a bit of a dive, it wasn't for his own efforts. He was single-handedly at times the one thing keeping the Jets from basically being a lotto team. So, He is, for me, one of the most special players we've ever watched. I really feel like he deserves the Hart Trophy this year. He deserves the Vezina. He deserves the Jennings, and he'll get at least two of those. The Hart Trophy, they don't ever give this to goalies. They just don't. But if you model it off of Price's season, he's doing a lot of the same, very similar stats lines where you're looking at sort of the separation between him and league average. And he and Price are pacing about the same. I think Hellebuyck's numbers are a bit better. I think he's got the edge. And, we haven't really seen a goalie win an award like this in a while. We don't even really see goalies in general get the nod for the Hart that often. So, um, be very curious to know how this sort of results. But at the end of the day, right, the most important thing is that there is a fourth award that Helly is chasing, and it's a cup. The Stanley Cup is really the last thing he needs to put on his resume to get himself a guaranteed stamp to the NHL Hall of Fame. Now, to me, he's already going in, and I feel pretty confident in that. But I think the cup ring would just sort of cement his legacy and actually put it in the minds of everyone in the public that he is truly one of the greats of all time. Because of his playoff performance that hasn't really been entirely his fault, he is, still in some ways disregarded or looked down upon by the rest of the folks who are outside of Winnipeg. Now, a lot of people are smartening up recently and kind of getting over that, but a ring would change his perception forever. And really, if there was ever a year that felt like the Jets were going to do it, it's this season, right? I feel like we are closer than Winnipeg has ever been since that 17-18 season. While I do have some concerns heading into the postseason, the good news is that a lot of other teams also have their own issues to deal with. Everyone is flawed this year in some capacity, and so if the Jets are going to be flawed too, the one area that they have a clear advantage over everyone else is in net, and that can really make the difference when you start getting into these 5, 6, 7 game series. So, I just hope that at the end of this incredible year, regardless of how it ends, it doesn't take away from what's been an amazing regular season and really one of the greatest goalie seasons we've ever seen. I count my blessings that he is a Jet. I can't believe we got him extended. That was really, for me, one of the best moments as a fan in recent memory. There just aren't many players to where I would look at them if they were to wear another jersey and I'd probably feel sick. Hellebuyck's one of them, though. He is a guy that if ever he wore a crest that wasn't the Jets, yeah, I wouldn't be able to tolerate that. So, so glad he signed for the foreseeable future. We have our MVP, and you heard it in tonight's game. The fans were chanting MVP every other shift. They know who it is, and I'm starting to think the rest of the league is wising up to this. He is the guy who has led this team for many, many seasons. He's been one of the few constants that I can say year in and year out has really held up his end of the bargain. I just hope, for not just his sake, but also for really this team's image, that the playoff stuff that has haunted this squad finally goes away, right? If ever there was a year to vanquish your demons, it's this one. If the Jets go to the Cup Finals, man, that would be like the best thing ever. And I hope that, we get to see the Caps there, not just because it's local, so it's a little easier for me travel-wise, but also because I feel like we were denied by the Knights in 17-18. This, for me, is us coming full circle. And if Hellebuyck is the one to lead the way, my goodness, would that be one heck of a story to tell your kids. So, I'd be curious to know how you feel about Hellebuyck. Where do you rank him in terms of your all-time favorite Jets? I personally put him probably at the top for me. I never got to see Dale when he was playing, so for me that I don't quite have that experience, which I do find a little bit unfortunate. I would have loved to have seen Howard Chuck play back in the day, but you know what? I've gotten to see Hellebuyck, and that's really fortunate and special enough. For those of you who have probably watched all these generations of Jets, would love to get your thoughts on who your favorite is and where Hellebuyck maybe ranks amongst all of those. What is kind of funny is it's ostensibly a little strange to say you have fun watching Hellebuyck because he's just a goalie, but you know what? He is very special and fun to watch in his own way, and sometimes he'll pull off those miracle saves that only Hellebuyck can do. So let me know your thoughts on your favorite Jets in the comments below, or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. In just a little bit, I do want to chat about, the recent Jets rotation of depth players and who I think really should be in the playoff lineup, perhaps where they should be playing, and who might be better served more in a press box sort of capacity. We'll chat about that in just a brief moment. But before we go too much further, did want to shout out our friends and partners at 5 Hour Energy. Daylight savings snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. It comes in some great flavors like Tropical Burst. I personally find that, for a quick boost, that hit of caffeine and essential little vitamins and stuff, it's great. And the flavors like watermelon, blue raspberry, peach mango, tons of options to choose from, very portable. You just grab it and go. You pop a little cap, enjoy a quick little hit of fruity freshness, and you're on with your day. When I do these podcasts, obviously it's late at night, so that extra bit of energy can help me get through a long viewing and tracking session before I hit the airwaves, so to speak. And if you want to join me in doing so, you can head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from. And you can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are just wrapping up with some thoughts on guys who have sort of rotated in for the Jets this year and players who I feel maybe have earned spots over some others. Now, this is going to be a pretty controversial one in some ways, I guess. There may even be some opinions that I have that are a little bit counter to what I usually say. So let's start off with one of the hottest ones. Between Stanley and Fleury, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I feel like Stanley has probably won the third pairing spot over Fleury. Hayden in his last couple of games was really, really rough. Stanley has his warts, and I do think that in the playoffs, some of those might get exposed. Ideally, we would have seen what Heinola has to offer, but we all know that Villy's just not getting in because Arniel doesn't see him as A, a big guy, and B, a PKer. And because of that, he will always be down in the pecking order. It just is what it is. We just have to accept it. The trade this offseason will probably be for the best for all parties involved. Really a shame that we never really got to see what Heinola can do. I think the third pairing for Winnipeg is going to have to be really sheltered in the playoffs. I know Stanley's last couple of games have generally been decent. He's kept away from doing anything super crazy. I think he's kept the danger to a minimum. I just don't really know that I trust him to keep doing that against better competition, right? You start facing a lot of playoff teams consistently or in a 6 to 7 game series like we're going to see here in a few weeks. I think his vulnerabilities will start to show again. But for now, if you have to choose between him and Fleury, I got to be honest, Fleury really hasn't won that spot either. I think in an ideal world, and what we're probably going to see here once everyone's fully healthy, it's going to be a Shen Miller pairing. I think that's probably the best way to do it. I have my own concerns about Shen Miller, but if I have to choose, again, gun to the head kind of situation, I would probably say Shen Miller is more preferable than Stanley Miller. Logan will probably, come out of there, but again, it's going to depend on what happens with Pionk's health because he's still kind of in the week-to-week state. I don't even really think he's been skating yet, so we don't even know what his status is. Let's just kind of table that one for now and assume that either one of Stanley or Fleury may have to play at least one playoff game. And if I'm choosing one, I guess it's going to be Stanley. In terms of the bottom six, this is probably where there's some less controversy. I think Gustafsson should be in over Kupari. Coops, I think, has done an okay job this year. The growth in this game is definitely something to really laud. I think he's done a really good job of turning himself into a pretty serviceable, fourth line forward. He's fast. He sometimes has some decent, playmaking ability, and he has been an effective forechecker. I think the thing with him, though, is that his game is very limited, right? He's kind of like Tanev in his very early years where, he could kind of bang and crash in the corners and go very fast in a certain direction, but there were moments where the decision-making and IQ were really absent. I saw Morgan Barron the other night against, I think it was Washington, either that or maybe it was Dallas. I forget when this was, but Barron was like banging his stick on a zone entry, just begging for the puck, and Kupari actually carried it and ended up turning it over. And I think Barron actually got kind of pissed at him. So this, I think, must have been the Caps game. It was actually a very funny thing to watch because, like, Barron, usually doesn't get that assertive or irritated about stuff. So very interesting to see that. But I think it just sort of demonstrates to where Kupari had a clearer option to create an offensive opportunity, and he just didn't use it. I think Gus is one of those players who's better at recognizing it, right? He was a pretty gifted playmaker at the AHL level. He's traditionally been a really strong two-way presence. I think his forechecking game is also just more well-rounded. He's just a menace in the corners and along the walls, and because of his considerable size and strength, maybe he'll trade some skating speed for it, but he's really good at sealing those spaces off and just being a presence down low and in those board battles. So for that reason, I think Gus should be in. If I am looking elsewhere, Appleton, for me, I really think should move to the fourth line. I think he's been okay. I just feel like, if I'm looking to elevate a couple of players, I think Iafallo should be somewhere in the top 9. I think he's really earned that. Gus should probably also be in the mix for a position like that. He won't be for a lot of reasons, but he should be. Nemesnikov, I would love as your fourth line center. I think that would be amazing. But Barron's also been really good at center on the fourth line. So maybe even putting Nemesnikov as your fourth line wing or something, or even third line wing, could be really intriguing. So Winnipeg definitely has options there, and it's nice. I do suspect that when everyone's healthy, they'll go back to the original lines, which I don't love. I think we saw, even with the offense that they're trading right now, the defense that these lines are putting up with the new combinations has been stellar. So, I really didn't like the original arrangement. Obviously, you would prefer not to have Velarde go down to find a new one, but at least we're seeing like Ehlers and Lowry playing together. We're seeing some pretty decent results from the top line. That's all stuff that I think, it's a good spark, right? And hopefully, if they do reunite the old lines, that spark carries over. I, again, have my own suspicions about that, but we'll have to see how Arniel views all of this before we head into the postseason. Aside from that, I don't really think I'd fuss too much about anyone else starting. I think Tanev has probably deserved, a starting role. He's been fine. I do think that he does have some limitations. He's also probably going to bench Kupari, so do I think he deserves it over Kupari? Yeah, I guess. He's a more physical player, and sometimes his chaos and sort of straightforward speed and the way that he uses his body is actually relatively effective. And it doesn't really seem to matter who you play on the fourth line, so all of this is kind of moot. They just do really well in general. But if I have to say one or the other, probably Tanev over Coops. I'm sure he and Gus are both going to be sitting here in the postseason, but would love it if maybe Gustafsson gets a longer look with his team. But curious to know who all of your rotational picks are. Drop them in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. Obviously, this coming weekend, we have a big game against the Canucks. We will have a recap of that on Monday, hoping to record yet another victory celebration. But for tonight's show, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We will see you back here next week. So see you then. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets go.